from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting, good morning. I'm Beth Voorhees. We're bringing you live coverage of a public hearing on Senate Bill 347, creating the Firearms Act of 2015 to provide that persons may carry concealed weapons within the state. It passed the Senate on February 27th. Without obtaining a license to carry concealed deadly weapons. This hearing is being conducted by the House Judiciary Committee. Right now, we're just seeing the chandelier from the House of Delegates chamber as people gather in the chamber for this public hearing. We're sure that the House staff will soon begin coverage of this public hearing as people make their way into the House chamber for it. And then you'll see that the cameras will show the House chamber and all the desks and the seats, and they will begin this public hearing. Despite the weather, the legislature is in session today. The governor has issued a state of emergency. The Emergency Operations Center at the Capitol has been activated. It's staffed by the National Guard, state police, and state agencies such as the Department of Health and Human Resources, the Department of Environmental Protection, collecting information about conditions across the state from county emergency management officials. And conditions, well, they're not good. Colleges and universities are closed today. Courthouses are closed. The Supreme Court at the Capitol is closed. All schools are closed. Driving conditions throughout the state are difficult on top of flooding yesterday and very heavy rain. Now here we are with a major snowstorm that's affecting the state. It's going to give us about a lot of snow during this day. So we'll just wait here and bear with us while the House gets itself in order to bring you this public hearing on Senate Bill 347, creating the Firearms Act of 2015. It states the purpose of this bill is to create the West Virginia Firearms Act of 2015. The bill repeals the exception section of the code to prohibitions against carrying concealed handguns and exemptions from licensing fees. It authorizes carrying a handgun for purposes of self-defense while in the woods of this state, whether the handgun is concealed or not. The bill provides that if the findings of fact and conclusions of law of the court fall to uphold a denial of a license, the applicant is entitled to reasonable costs and attorney's fees payable to the sheriff's office which issued the denial. The bill amends the provision in relation to who is prohibited from possessing firearms under Section 7 of this article, maintains the penalty provisions. It sets out the procedure for the sheriff in determining eligibility for license when license holder changes the home county. The bill amends the language relating to the right of certain persons to limit possession of firearms on premises and private real property. That's the bill description as it was introduced in the Senate. What amendments have been made since then, I'm sure that will be explained during the course of this public hearing. For now, we are in a holding pattern until the House Judiciary Committee and its chair, Delegate John Schott, begin this public hearing. Please stand by. You can follow us on Twitter at WV Public News or find us on Facebook at WV Public. You can also comment on the public hearing on Twitter using the hashtag WVLegis, WVLEGIS. We are standing by for the beginning of the public hearing on Senate Bill 347. All right, now we see a shot of the House chamber. Due to this weather, we wondered how many people would actually attend this public hearing. I received word from a news colleague that a lot of sheriff's deputies are at the Capitol, presumably to attend this public hearing. You see Delegate John Schott, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. He's at the clerk's podium there, and he will give everyone instructions about the public hearing, how long they get to testify before the committee about this, whether it's 1 minute or 2 minutes. They keep very close to those times. If they get just 1 minute to talk, they're cut off after a minute. 2 minutes, they're cut off after 2 minutes. It all depends on how many people attend the public hearing and how many people sign up to speak. Public hearings are held at the Capitol at the request of any citizen can ask for a public hearing on any bill, and the committee that is holding that bill will hold a public hearing to take testimony from citizens for or against the bill. These things are very well coordinated. You'll hear Delegate Schott call the name of the person who's come to the podium and then the person who is next on deck, as it were, and he will continue to call names of the people who are speaking at this public hearing. That is the Sergeant at Arms, Marshall Clay. He is not there to speak at the public hearing. But with this weather, it's no wonder that this has been delayed. This is Senate Bill 347, a correction. We thought it was Senate Bill 35. That's a different firearms bill. It is Senate Bill 347, creating the Firearms Act of 2015. It passed the Senate on February 27th, was reported to the House, and it now sits in the House Judiciary Committee.
This is a public hearing regarding Senate Bill 347, which is entitled Creating the Firearms Act of 2015. We have about 15 people who have signed up to speak, and the way we will go will be alternating between those who signed up in favor of the bill and those who signed up against the bill. We'll call 2 names at one time. The first person will come to the podium and speak. We're allowing about 3 minutes. If you'll pay attention to the red light at the podium, that'll tell you when your time's up. When you see the red light come on, please wrap up your comments and then move away from the podium. So the second person who will ask the second person whose name is called to come up and stand fairly close to the podium or sit in a seat near the podium so you can move to the podium quickly. What we ask that you do is that you keep your comments civil, not personal. We ask that you not make any outbursts, either in favor or against. If it causes a commotion, we'll have to ask the Sergeant at Arms to remove you. So please keep that in mind. If we have time afterwards, we'll ask the speakers to remain, and members of the committee may have questions. If If you have written materials, if you'd please give them to the clerk. The clerk will share them with the members of the committee after the public hearing. We also have copies of the bills. If you haven't seen them, they're up here at this desk in the front on my left, probably your right. We'll begin with Kent Carper, who will be followed by Keith Morgan. Mr. Carper, could you come to the podium, please? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kent Carper, and I rise in opposition to this bill, certainly not in opposition to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, like all of our Constitution, is to be cherished, to be protected, and to be honored. And the right to bear arms is just that, the right to bear arms. But interestingly enough, in this chamber right now, not a single one of you can carry a weapon, even with a concealed weapon permit in this chamber. Meaning that this legislature has correctly determined that the Second Amendment is not absolute. And that goes on and on to some other things. But let's just discuss this from the perspective of law enforcement. Why do we not trust our law enforcement? Why do we not trust our police, our sheriffs, our police chiefs to see that this can be a problem for them? After all, they are the ones that are out here many times by themselves. The difference between open carry and concealed is quite simple. The police need at least a chance for life. They need a chance to know if it is a bad guy and not a good guy with the gun. And that's why the police almost unanimously object to this bill. At least let's just honor their right to object to it, because after all, they're the ones that are protecting us. In this town, 2 police officers were shot down like a dog with a gun by a bad guy with a gun. In this state, in the last couple of years, we've had troopers killed. We've had deputy sheriffs shot. The police need our support, not just our clapping and tell them how much we like them. They need our support. On the finance side, that's not as important as the rest of it, but let me just suggest to you that anyone that calls the pistol fund a slush fund really should see what it's done. That in our county, it is used to buy bulletproof vests. It's used for training. Every penny is spent transparently, and you know where it goes to. My son is a deputy sheriff. My son-in-law is a Charleston paramedic. Every day, they face the prospect of having someone take a gun and stick it in their belly. There's no reason in the world not to at least require some minimum training. I'll point out one last thing, Mr. Chairman. I know my time's about up. We've had 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 every year that are rejected out of 1,000 or so that apply for permit in this county. Some of these people are in line to be tried for crime, and they go down to the courthouse and apply for a gun permit. That's not a story, that's an absolute fact. There is a way to stop a bad guy with a gun. Support the police. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carper. Keith Morgan, followed by Steve Neto, I think it is.
Yeah, my name's Keith Morgan. I'm the president of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League. And first thing, I'd like to thank the chairman, thank the members of the Judiciary Committee in presence. And I'd like to thank all these law enforcement officers that have showed up in violation of state law, armed on Capitol Complex, to speak against and stand against our rights. I will be brief because what I tend to do is boil things down to a simple truth, as simple as possible. There is one substantive change to the law in this bill. And what that is the removal of a $100 fee to conceal a firearm. There's no change in who can carry one. There's no change in who's prohibited. Just one change, and that is the removal of a fee. This is an opportunity for the legislature and of course starting here today with the Judiciary Committee to right a wrong. It is wrong for the legislature of West Virginia to take our rights and then allow the sheriffs to sell them back to us. There is nothing fair, there is nothing right about that. So you have the opportunity to fix this when it comes before the committee for a vote, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Steve Netto, followed by Keith Owen Campbell.
Hello, my name is Steve Netto. I'm here on behalf of the West Virginia State Fraternal Order Police. I'm the president of the local lodge. First, let me say that the West Virginia State Fraternal Order Police stands in support of the Second Amendment. We support the right of individual citizens to carry firearms and to defend themselves and their families if needed. But we see this as a basic public safety issue. We don't care about the money. We don't get it, so we're not interested in that. Under current law, a police officer dealing with a concealed carry permit holder knows at the minimum that that individual has passed a background check and is legally entitled to own and or possess a firearm. The officer at the very least knows that this person has been vetted and that he does not need to check beyond what the initial interaction started. If you take the same scenario now with this new bill, but without a concealed carry permit, the police officer will not know if this person can legally possess a firearm. He will not know if this person can safely handle the firearm. On top of the original reason for the interaction, the police officer will also need to do some type of basic background check. How can he do that on the side of the road? That is no longer allowed to law enforcement to do a background check, so the officer now dealing with this person has no idea whether this person can legally carry or not carry a firearm. The background check that can be done on the side of the road does not show whether this person is under indictment, does not show whether this person is mentally competent, does not even show if this person is a convicted felon. So does the officer just let this person go based on no information? At least now, the way the law is, if you just present that card, that officer knows that you have a basic vetting and that you can carry a firearm. West Virginia has also no requirement to produce identification, so the officer now cannot even really do that background check if you refuse to give him your West Virginia driver's license. This law does not require to carry ID if you no longer carry a concealed permit. I hate what ifs, but in this particular case, this law, if it goes into effect, would actually allow a person from out of state, possibly a drug dealer down from Detroit, who has yet to be convicted of any crime, who is living in someone's apartment selling drugs, and now he can legally carry a firearm because he's never been convicted of a crime. This will not change that, and there's no way an officer can check for that. Please do not do away with a very simple and effective way for a West Virginia citizen to show that, number one, he's a West Virginia resident, number two, he's a responsible gun owner, and number three, he is legally entitled to possess and carry a firearm. This is an officer safety issue.
Thank you, Mr. Netto. Keith Owen Campbell, followed by Frank Hartman.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. We keep hearing about this being an officer safety issue, and one thing that confuses me, we have some very fine officers in the state of West Virginia, both on the municipal level as well as the state level and county. They're very well trained. It is my understanding that they automatically assume everybody may be armed and dangerous. So I don't know that this would change their safety issue at all. I know it changes something for my children. I have two sons. One just turned 21, so he has his permit. It's not an issue. But when he was less than 21, and my other son, who is 18 now, we organize a lot of open carry lunches. And so they can legally open carry at these lunches. And the minute their shirt falls over that gun, now they're a criminal. My son didn't change in any way when that shirt falls over his firearm. I don't think he should be criminalized for something that's his right to do if his shirt falls over it. I practice law in Pennsylvania. I live in West Virginia. I practice law in Pennsylvania. Life's just easier that way. One thing in Pennsylvania, they have a $20 fee. As much as I've heard this is not about the money, I've not heard any law enforcement officer or any speaker for any law enforcement department say, you know what, let's reduce the fees to $20 like Pennsylvania. If it's about getting the safety class to get the permit, why hasn't that been thrown out? Because it's about the money. Don't fool yourself. This is a right we have. This is a right I shouldn't have to pay for, period. We're one of the most expensive states around. I became an NRA instructor so I could offer the class a lot cheaper than everybody else did, because so many people I know couldn't get the permit because they just simply couldn't afford it. One thing about the NRA instructors, you say you want us to take this class so we learn safety. I can tell you this, The NRA basic pistol class teaches you one thing. It teaches you which end goes boom. Anything more than that, you've learned on your own from either taking it upon yourself as if you bought a welder. There's no requirement to take a class to use the welder. But anybody with a modicum of common sense is going to instruct themselves or reach out to somebody. Hey, Tommy, come teach me how to use this so I don't blow my garage up. Somebody buying a gun is going to do the same thing. Hey, Tommy, take me to the range. I want to know how to use this. I am offended. I'm offended to no end at the fine law enforcement officers think that every one of us is an idiot and a criminal upon sight. They sit up there, they look down upon us, we're the enemy. It shouldn't be like that. Why not assume that I'm a law-abiding citizen if I have a firearm? Why not assume that I'm a law-abiding citizen when I pull over for you in the first place? Last, I'll leave you with this. You're worried about somebody failing the permit process. If they fail the permit process, they probably can't own a firearm anyway. So if they try to buy one, they're denied. If they buy one without going through an FFL, then if they get caught with it, that's on them. But let me repeat that. That's on them. Don't penalize me because of the what-ifs that might happen 200 miles away at the other end of the state. I did what I'm supposed to. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm not an idiot. I've carried a gun all my life, except for when I was in the People's Republic of New Jersey where it was forbidden, which is why I moved back to my state of West Virginia. And I hope that everybody here trusts a Mountaineer to be sensible and law-abiding like we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Frank Hartman, followed by Joanna Kirkpatrick.
Good morning. My name is Frank Hartman, and I'm with the West Virginia Association of Counties. If the House of Delegates would enact Senate Bill 347, it would put us in an extreme minority of states. Only 4 other states would have a law similar to this. And of those states, it is not without some reasonable regulation, either by age, by training, or other requirements to own and have a concealed weapon. So these other states are not without regulation. West Virginia then would be the most extreme of these few states by having no regulations of any kind, and you buy a firearm and that's it. No other state does quite like that. It is a constitutional right, and everybody embraces that. Everybody supports that, and I know the legislature supports certainly the Second Amendment. But our constitutional rights are not without some regulation. Our free speech rights are restrained in what has been presented as an all or nothing, take it or leave it proposition. I'm sure that there is a reasonable position in the middle that if the parties could talk about and come to that, I think we could all live with that. I know that when I've talked with law enforcement, that's all they seek. They're not anti-gun by any means, but they are seeking reasonable regulations. The fees, all those sorts of things should be part of that conversation, and that conversation just simply isn't taking place right now. I would ask the legislature to please at least listen to law enforcement, the people who are putting their lives on the line every day, protecting our families. We have completely, at least as far as it went in the Senate, completely ignored their point of view. We have not listened to anything that they've had to say, and they've been disregarded completely. Make them a member of the conversation, and I think we can make reasonable regulations, Mr. Chairman. And that's all simply that I ask as a citizen here in Kanawha County and as on behalf of the West Virginia Association of Counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Joanna Kirkpatrick, followed by D. Price.
Good morning. My name is Joanna Kirkpatrick. I am a private citizen who lives here in Charleston, and like many, I've taken some personal time away from my job to be here this morning. I do have the utmost respect for the law enforcement community. Unfortunately, I have to respectfully disagree with them on this bill. I have been a social worker since 1998, and the majority of my career has been working with children, families, and lower income citizens. And my first decision on this bill, I took the time to read through it to assure myself that it did not allow for criminals, domestic abusers, or other at-risk individuals, particularly the mentally unstable, to carry guns. My main point on this bill, in addition to the constitutional arguments, is that there are a lot of social barriers for women and lower income residents to make the decision to protect themselves. And unfortunately, law enforcement can't be everywhere. The $100 plus fee that is required for these permits, for a lot of people, is a significant amount of money. And by using that money to carry the fee, that then does not allow them to spend that money on quality training and additional training above and beyond the basic carry requirements. So I have a little bit of a different take on this bill, but I'm a believer that citizens should be able and empowered to protect themselves, and I personally believe that this bill allows people to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkpatrick. D. Price, followed by Danielle Martin.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to address this important public issue. My name is Dee Price Childers, and I'm a mother of 3 with a grandchild on the way, and a volunteer with the West Virginia chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We're a grassroots movement of American mothers fighting for public safety measures that respect the Second Amendment while protecting Americans from gun violence. I'm here today representing the West Virginia Moms chapter, who strongly oppose Senate Bill 347. I might add, my husband is a gun owner who strongly supports my efforts on this. In 46 states, including ours right now, people have to get a permit to carry a concealed loaded gun in public. Here in West Virginia, as you know, to get a permit to carry concealed, you must be at least 21 years old, have proper training, and have been convicted and not have any convictions of misdemeanor violent weapons offenses in the past 5 years. Senate Bill 347 dismantles our state's concealed carry permitting system altogether, allowing teenagers 18 years old and up with no training to carry hidden, concealed, loaded guns in public across the state. My son is a WVU graduate, and I love WVU. But can you imagine the aftermath of a big WVU win if 18, 19, 20-year-old kids in Morgantown are allowed to concealed carry with no permit, no training whatsoever? The burning couches will become the least of our worries. The gun lobby likes to refer to permitless carry as constitutional carry, but this bill has nothing to do with the Constitution and everything to do with basic public safety. All constitutional rights have regulations, and they carry responsibilities. As moms, we will not accept a state where there's no provision to ensure that those who carry concealed loaded guns around our children have passed a background check, have a clean recent criminal history, and have had adequate firearm training. We also will not accept a state that puts its own law enforcement at risk by leaving police powerless to confirm whether an armed person suspected of a crime can legally carry a gun. Under current law enforcement officer who stops an armed person suspected of a crime can confirm that the person has a permit to carry the gun and is therefore not a felon or other dangerous person. By wiping out this permit requirement, Senate Bill 347 endangers state and local police by blocking them from ensuring that a suspect is not a felon prohibited from carrying a gun. Just as we don't allow people to drive cars without a valid driver's license, we shouldn't allow them to carry hidden, loaded guns in crowded public places without a permit. Can you imagine a teenager who's never been trained to properly handle a gun being allowed to legally conceal a loaded gun in public? That's just not good public safety. It's not the kind of community we want to raise our children and grandchildren in. And on behalf of the West Virginia chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, I urge you to vote no to Senate Bill 347. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Danielle Martin, followed by Alan Kisner.
Thank you for having us here today. My name is Danielle Martin, and I am now a current citizen of Ohio County in Wheeling, West Virginia. I moved here from the People's Republic of New Jersey in 2010. One of the first things I had to do when I moved here was come up with money to take a class that taught me nothing more than the parts of a gun, which I already knew. and then give at least $100 to my sheriff in order to carry my weapon concealed. It was definitely a financial hardship. Open carry is already legal in this state, also for 18-year-olds. Why should I or any other law-abiding citizen have to pay anyone for our rights if we want to put a coat on or get into our vehicles, or even worse, prevent my own rape? As for training that everyone opposed to this bill is whining about, Pennsylvania has no training for concealed carry permit. 10 minutes and $20 and you have your permit. No training. Shall not be infringed. There is no ambiguity there. You should pass this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Alan Kisner, followed by Danielle Kerry.
Good morning. My name is Alan Kisner. I'm the Vice President of the West Virginia Sheriff's Association and a sheriff in Monongalia County. The few points that I want to make on behalf of the Sheriff's Association are that when we look at talking about there's no changes to Senate Bill 347, we consider that there are some blaring changes to that bill, and right off the bat, those changes are that there's no training required and that there's no background checks required. For us in law enforcement, when you give somebody the right to do something, along with that right comes responsibilities. All we're asking about and asking for this House to continue with their bill and the Senate to change their mind on the bill is to require that training and those background checks be done. Those are minimal standards we feel for somebody to meet to be able to carry a concealed weapon. Currently, there are open carry laws that exist. I've heard several people talk about, well, there's open carry laws, there's open carry law. Yes, there is. And if you're having concealed weapons being carried, those standards that are now in existence should remain in existence. There's only 4 states, as you know, that have permitless carry laws on the books right now. That means that 46 don't. And that should tell everybody something about those states that don't. They feel, and how they feel about the safety of the citizens of their state. We're not saying that everybody isn't capable of carrying a concealed weapon. All we're saying is there should be standards to be met to be able to have that right to do it. One of the analogies I used in Morgantown when I spoke on this subject on a radio show was that in the state of West Virginia, just like in any other state, when you get your driver's license, that's a privilege that's given to you by the state, but there are certain standards that you have to meet to get your driver's license. You have to have a learning period, you have to have testing, you have a learning period where you're with a licensed driver so that you can learn how to operate that vehicle, control that vehicle under different circumstances. Guns are made for one reason, and guns are made to kill. We're just asking that the minimal standards for carrying concealed weapons are kept as they are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kisner. Danielle Kerry, followed by Patty Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Danielle Kerry, and I'm here representing the National Rifle Association in support of Senate Bill 347. I just briefly want to touch, I think some of the points have already been made, but briefly want to touch on 2 aspects of the bill which I think are key. One of that is who can carry a firearm. I've heard mention here today that we're talking about drug dealers coming down from Detroit or criminals in the state of West Virginia who can carry a firearm. That's not the case. I understand that's a fear, but that doesn't change in this bill. All prohibited people, whether they be on a state or federal level, are still prohibited. So if you can't legally possess or purchase a firearm, this bill wouldn't change that. The second aspect I want to touch on is officer safety. I had a good conversation and enjoyed the conversations I've had with Mr. Miller and the Sheriff's Association and some law enforcement officers that I had the opportunity to have lunch with yesterday. One of the things we talked about yesterday at lunch had to deal with officer safety. And I asked the gentleman, I said, right now, as you and I are sitting here and you're in your official duty, would you not consider it in your training to be considering me as a potential threat? And he agreed that law enforcement officers look at every individual as a potential threat, which they're taught to do because you could be at some point in time. This bill doesn't change the safety for law enforcement officers. The only thing this bill does is it extends the right to law-abiding individuals who can legally pass a background check to purchase and possess a firearm, to be able to carry so without, now they can do so without a jacket. This would allow them, if it gets cold or starts to rain, to put that jacket on. That's the only thing this changes. It's a very minimal change, and I know it's gotten all kinds of misinformation, but those are the two things I want to touch base on because I feel like those have continued to perpetuate the issue with this bill. I appreciate y'all's time, and again, I ask for the members' support on Senate Bill 347. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kerry. Patty Hamilton, followed by Melissa Smith.
Good morning. The West Virginia Association of Counties, representing West Virginia's elected county commissioners, sheriffs, prosecuting attorneys, county clerks, circuit clerks, and assessors, is opposed to Senate Bill 347. Our primary message to you is that this bill is fixing a process that isn't broken. Our concealed weapons permit process works. Our citizens were not clamoring about it. It works for our law enforcement. We have been told, as you have heard already, that we would be joining 4 other states that currently allow permitless concealed carry. So obviously 46 do not. We have not been convinced that we need to emulate such a very small minority, so therefore we did some research. For example, the bill as proposed, as you've heard, will allow 18-year-olds to carry concealed. Alaska, Arizona, and Wyoming require a person to be 21. Those are 3 of the 4 states that we are being asked to join. Our bill would allow non-residents to come into West Virginia carrying a concealed weapon. They would not have to have a permit. Wyoming requires a person to be a resident. Non-residents must have a concealed carry permit from their state of residence, and that they must recognize Wyoming permits in turn. These statutes in other states have standards for interaction with others and with law enforcement. For example, in Arizona, it is an offense to fail to accurately respond to law enforcement officers if the officer asks whether the person is carrying a concealed deadly weapon. That is not in this bill. In Alaska, a person must obtain the express permission of an adult residing there before the person may bring a concealed weapon within another person's residence. None of these safeguards are in Senate Bill 347, so that this law would put us in an even smaller minority. The bill endangers law enforcement for these reasons with no restrictions, and it endangers the public. We also couldn't find any other state that makes the sheriff liable for legal fees and court costs if the applicant is denied a permit and an appeal overturns the sheriff's decision. This is a dangerous precedent and it would have a chilling effect on issuing denials, which is the sheriff's statutory responsibility when necessary. Those who obtain a concealed carry weapons permit have met a minimum training standards. No training is required with this bill. Any person with absolutely no training can drop a gun into their purse or pocket and go into public. My dad was an FBI special agent and a sharpshooter. I've never handled a gun in my life. Therefore, you wouldn't want me dropping a gun into my purse and taking it anywhere without training. We ask you to oppose Senate Bill 347, or at the very, very least, put some restrictions that other states have done in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Melissa Smith, followed by Matt Collins.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Melissa Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Courthouse Facilities Improvement Authority. And I'm here today professionally, although I do have personal concerns as my husband is a West Virginia State Trooper. I'm here today to talk to you about the fees. I know that's been an issue that's been brought up, and I have been not included in the discussion. $15 of each permit fee is provided to the West Virginia Courthouse Facilities Improvement Authority. I take offense to that being called a slush fund. Nothing could be further from the truth. There has been lots of misleading information, but nobody has asked us what exactly we spend the funds on. 95% of our funds are given back to counties in direct service We are probably the most efficiently ran state agency. I'm the only employee. We're very transparent. You can go to the state auditor's transparency website and see how much funds we take in and how much funds we give back out. All of our funds go to the county, and they in turn flip those funds and give them to private businesses to conduct construction and rehabilitation on the courthouses. Companies such as Talbot Glass, Murray Sheet Metal, ZMM Architects, the list can go on and on. Those are the items that our $15 is spent on. It is not a slush fund. We think that this bill will make our fees decline some. We are not sure of the effects, but we would at least like to have been brought to the table. As a citizen of the state of West Virginia, I'm very proud of our courthouses, and I'm sure that many of you are too. The legislature implemented our authority just 13 years ago. I would challenge you to find a more efficiently ran government than county government. I would compare us to any private business also. I love our courthouses. I urge you to oppose 347, or at least bring us to the table to find a more middle ground that we could all agree on something. I feel it is our responsibility to take care of our courthouses as the citizens of this state.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Matt Collins, followed by Marcia Drake.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Matt Collins, and I am the State Director for West Virginia Gun Rights, a pro-Second Amendment organization with over 40,000 members statewide. The legislation before the committee is Senate Bill 347, which codifies constitutional carry into state law. Under this bill, anyone who is legally eligible to possess a firearm is legally able to carry it, openly or concealed, without the burdensome requirement of obtaining a permit. Critically, the bill does not change the current permit system. It merely gives gun owners another option for self-defense. A permit would still be an option, and therefore the same rules regarding reciprocity would still apply. Permit fees are a tax on basic rights guaranteed by both the U.S. and West Virginia constitutions. We don't beg permission from the government to exercise our First Amendment right to free speech. Why should law-abiding citizens be forced to pay a tax and get a permission slip from the government and bureaucrats in order to exercise their Second Amendment rights? With laws already prohibiting gun ownership for criminals and those who are mentally unstable, permits and their associated fees are simply a tax on law-abiding citizens. The proposal before us is not a new idea. In 1791, the founders adopted the Second Amendment to the Constitution to preserve our right to keep and bear arms without infringement. Currently, constitutional carry, as has been mentioned, is legal in 4 states: Arizona, Alaska, and Wyoming, and of course Vermont. More states like West Virginia are moving in that direction each year. Nevada and Kansas are likely to pass similar bills in their legislature this year. It has also been introduced this session in Texas, South Carolina, Montana, New Hampshire, Ohio, Indiana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, Maine, and Tennessee. This is not a radical idea. It's happening all over the country. The colleagues of yours in the Senate overwhelmingly supported this legislation 32-2. I urge every member of the committee to support this legislation as drafted without amendments. A vote for Senate Bill 347 is a vote for your God-given rights as guaranteed under both the U.S. and West Virginia Constitution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Marcia Drake, followed by Joyce Ludlowski.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Marcy Drake, and I represent the West Virginia Coalition Against Domestic Violence today. And domestic violence is about power and control of one person over another person. There are perpetrators of violence who are not allowed to carry guns because they're under an active protective order. We're not talking about those perpetrators. What we are very concerned about is a scenario that I would like you to imagine. A nice summer day, a couple appearing to be a loving couple walking down the sidewalk, arm around each other. What you don't see and what will happen, this isn't a maybe it will happen, this will happen. That abuser, and there are millions of them, that abuser is holding her hand on the concealed weapon that is in his pants or on his side, and that is going to eventually kill women, children, and men. This isn't about the Second Amendment. This is about safety. And I ask you, as a body who can make a difference in this bill, to at very least make changes to Senate Bill 347 that will provide some protections. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Drake. Joyce Ledlowski.
Good morning. My name is Joyce Ledlowski, and I am with the West Virginia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Senate Bill 347 creates an illusion of safety hidden behind our constitutional right to bear arms. This illusion, as Marcy just talked about, can be deadly for some victims of domestic violence. In 2012, West Virginia was ranked 13th in the nation for homicide of females by males. Access to firearms in domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide to women by 500%. If you think women can better protect themselves more readily by having a firearm, for every one woman who used a handgun to kill an intimate acquaintance in self-defense, 83 women were murdered by an intimate acquaintance using a handgun. Women living with a gun in the home are nearly 3 times more likely to be murdered than those without a gun in the home. This bill will weaken protections that are currently in place and decrease the safety of victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking by increasing access to firearms by abusers, preventing the opportunity to monitor those prohibited to possess firearms that are currently provided in the permit application and renewal process, and providing increased opportunity for intimidation, coercion, terrorizing threats to victims through ease of concealed carry. Common sense gun safety laws are consistent with the Second Amendment. When we look around at our community, we want to feel confident that our neighbors who own guns have gone through a background check to determine that they are not a convicted felon or domestic abuser, are not seriously mentally ill, do not have a prohibiting domestic violence restraining order, just as we want to feel that we're sharing the road with licensed drivers who are not barred from driving due to past actions. And we want to know that our local law enforcement have authority to keep us safe in the places where our children play and where our government does our business. We urge you to balance the right to bear arms with the right to be safe in one's own home and community, and we ask that you oppose Senate Bill 347, or at least place some more safety and protections into that bill through amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ledlowski. That concludes the list of those who signed up to present. We're going to have a few minutes available for questions from committee members, but before we get to that point, let me just make a couple things clear. This bill did not originate in the Judiciary Committee of the House. It was referred to us after it was passed in the Senate. It was originated in the Senate by a bipartisan group of senators. So we have not taken this bill up in Judiciary. We received a request for a public hearing, and therefore we did not put it on the agenda. So I can assure you that our members have not either discussed it in committee or formed any unalterable opinions regarding the bill. We will give it serious consideration when it's put on the agenda, but in the meantime, we're certainly open to your input, either through such a meeting as today or individually. The other thing that I just want to comment on, I've gotten numerous emails that urge the committee to pass this bill without any amendments. And I think that probably indicates that those who sent the emails have never seen our committee at work, because we have 25 very diligent members on our committee and a staff of 4 excellent attorneys. So it's very rare that a bill comes to us that's not changed in some way, either to make it more defensible if it goes to court, or to improve it in some way, or to rebalance the interests that are at stake. So if you have an expectation that every I and every T is going to be dotted and crossed the same way when this comes out of committee, you're in for a disappointment. That does not mean we're going to change the substance of the bill, but it could. But we're going to look at it very carefully, because we are, as I said, a very conscientious and diligent committee. To that end, I don't know when this bill will be on the agenda, but we intend to be working Saturday and Sunday as well as weekdays, and we'll give it as quick of attention as we can. If in doing so, we can do it thoroughly, thoughtfully, and with due consideration. To the members of the committee, we still have a number of our speakers, our presenters here. Are any members of the committee wishing to ask questions of any of these folks before we move on to our regular committee meeting? Gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Azinger, can you tell us who you'd like to ask questions to?
Is Mr. Rainey still in here to tell the NRA, or one of you gentlemen that spoke? Just so I understand.
Delegate Azinger, you need to use the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Just so I understand correctly.
Let's let him get to the microphone and then ask your question. Mr. Morgan?
Do I understand correctly, the only thing this bill does is from here to here?
That is a summary of the substantive change of this bill, yes.
Okay, so essentially we're just going, we have open carry in West Virginia.
Right.
So this is legal. Showing you're walking around with a gun on your side is legal. Go ahead.
It is legal for anyone who is not a prohibited person via West Virginia's long list of disqualifiers, 18 years of age or older, to walk around openly carrying a firearm.
Okay, so this bill passes, now this is legal, correct?
If this bill passes, you can cover that firearm up with your jacket without paying the sheriff a $100 fee.
Thank you.
Are there the questions of Mr. Morgan by members of our committee while Mr. Morgan is at the microphone? Gentleman from the 62nd, Delegate Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of references here to concerns for lost revenue. The states that have passed this have their number of permits issued under the concealed carry permit process increased or decreased or stayed the same?
I'd like to take Arizona as a really interesting example, because if you follow the number of permits issued up until they pass constitutional carry, they increase at about 10,000 permits per year. And then the year that they actually pass constitutional carry, it's relatively flat. And then the following years, so you're talking the second year and beyond after they pass constitutional carry, their permits increase by about 30,000 a year. So from my perspective, it seems like the Sheriff's Association is in this committee attempting to shoot itself in the foot in terms of increased revenues over the long run.
Further questions from committee members of Mr. Morgan? Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Appreciate your input. Other members of the committee who have questions that they want to ask of the presenters? I do have a couple questions for Mr. Hartman, if you wouldn't mind coming back.
Yes, sir.
There are several things that you mentioned during your remarks regarding the regulations in some of the other states that have passed similar legislation, and you also mentioned the issue of fees. Has there been any discussion among the law enforcement and specifically sheriffs about reducing the fees for permits?
Not to my knowledge. That's not been part of the discussion.
Do you know what fees are being charged for similar permits elsewhere in the country?
I do not know the fee amounts, and we certainly can get that for you, Mr. Chairman.
If I heard you correctly, Alaska, Wyoming, and I'm not sure whether it was Arizona or one of those states, limits the ability to carry either openly or concealed to someone over 21. Is that correct?
I believe so. Ms. Hamilton had that more specific data, but I think it is Wyoming that restricts it to the age of 21.
Just the one state?
But I'm getting some hand signals from Ms. Hamilton. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
All right. And you also mentioned there were some requirements in Arizona with regard to responding to law officers' calls.
That was Ms. Hamilton's testimony. Again, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but she has those details. I think there are some restrictions or requirements to identify yourself or some affirmative response upon questioning from an officer.
All right. Perhaps we'll get Ms. Hamilton back up. Let me ask members of our committee if they have questions for Mr. Hartman before we release him. Thank you, Mr. Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Hamilton, could you share with us some of this information you've developed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The age 21 requirement, which states currently require that, of the four that you mentioned?
That is in Alaska, Arizona, and Wyoming.
And so the fourth state does not require a minimum age, or is it 18?
Of the four states that we are modeling with this bill, 3 of them have a 21-year requirement.
And the fourth state allows?
Oh, I'm sorry, Vermont.
Pardon me?
Vermont is the fourth state.
And it doesn't have minimum age, or is it 18?
I don't know. We only researched the 3.
Okay. And of those states that were mentioned that are considering legislation such as ours, and there were quite a few, have you all done any analysis as to what requirements they have?
We have not. We concentrated on the states that have had this in place for a while.
And I think you also mentioned Wyoming required a residency requirement. Is that correct?
Yes.
But the other 3 did not?
Not that we could find.
And you also mentioned Arizona had some sort of requirement that the person carrying respond to law enforcement. Can you be more specific on that?
Yes. Actually, all 3 seem to address interaction with law enforcement in some manner. In how you respond to law enforcement when asked a direct question, are you carrying a concealed weapon? I have the 3 states' information here with me that I'll leave with the committee.
That would be
as
helpful.
well.
Yes, if you'd leave it with the clerk when you're finished. And what about the minimum training requirements in any of those states? Are there training requirements, and how are they addressed?
I did not delve into that training requirement, and I don't want to misspeak because I didn't focus on that.
You've been tuned to live coverage of a public hearing on Senate Bill 347, the Firearms Act of 2015. On Friday morning at 8:30, we'll carry another public hearing, this one on Senate Bill 423 to amend the Above Ground Storage Tank Act. Full coverage of this public hearing and all legislative news and information on the legislature today at 6:30 on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Today, whether you provided input or not, as I indicated before. Before Monday. It could be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. We just haven't determined that yet. But our agenda is posted online at the legislative website. It's also posted here in the Capitol outside the committee room. Thank you again for your attendance. We're adjourned.